Hello and welcome to Meet Our Makers, an artist interview podcast produced in association with Beats Per Minute. I'm your host, Jeremy J. Facette. And on this episode, we get to meet Austra. Austra is the musical project of singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, producer Katie Stelmanis, and she just put out the newest Austra record this past November called Up Buttercup. And in this chat, we talk a lot about this record, the production of it, the style of it, which is very much indebted to dance music and Eurodance. And, she took a lot of inspiration from people like Orbital and Madonna's Ray of Light. And we talk about how she, with that musical lens, wrote these very personal songs about a very personal heartbreak that she experienced, the kind that she says she had to essentially grieve. So it's a pretty personal record, maybe her most personal record, and we talk about what that means for her and what it means to release songs this nakedly personal and almost private, and how she kind of weighs releasing or not releasing something because it is or isn't too private, and kind of where that line is for her. We talk about a lot of other things too. I've been a fan of hers since her debut record, Feel It Break, and so it was really great to get to chat with her about this new era of Austra and kind of touch base with an artist that I've been following for years. So I was very grateful to Katie for hanging out for a little bit. So thank you for listening. This is me meeting Austra.
Doing this.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm excited to have you. Yeah, I mean, I've been a fan of yours since Feel It Break, and it feels like it's been a long ass time since then.
Sure has.
And also a lot, and feels like also like no time at all. But here we are with a brand new Austra record, Up Buttercup, on November 14th on Domino. It's your first in over 5 years. Does not feel like it, but somehow I double checked my notes. The last one did come out over 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a couple months left until it's out. I mean, we're recording this in September, but how are you sort of feeling as you get back into the thick of things?
I mean, it's interesting because I feel like so much has changed in the last 5 years. Like already my last record actually came out May 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic. So that was sort of at the beginning of this big shift. But before that, I guess the last like normal album release I had would have been around 2017. And I mean, since then, it's like we live in a completely different era.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything that I am doing to promote this record is completely different than everything I would have done 10 years ago. So it's interesting to have to adapt to that.
Yeah. What do you think is like the most pronounced difference for you?
I think it's just honestly the emphasis of social media. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't even have an Austra Instagram until like 2016 or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was never a big part of anything that I was doing. And this time around, even though I feel like everyone I know hates social media, but like has to do it, and I have a similar feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna go for it and just like actually try, which somehow makes it less terrible when you sort of like plan everything in advance and actually like come up with a sort of like strategy.
Right. I mean, it's not like you are like in the storm at the exact moment that you have to weather the storm. Like you're kind of like pre-weathering the storm of social
Yeah.
media.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to approach it as sort of a creative thing as well. Like, I don't know, I don't think I'm doing it like the right way. I don't know if there is a right way, but I'm just like, okay, how can I sort of have fun with this and do with it what I want to do with it? And whether or not that's
Yeah.
a good thing, we'll see.
Yeah. It does seem like it's sort of a necessary evil these days. But yeah, I think if you can make it into something of your own kind of curation of fun or artistry or creativity, yeah, or just, I mean, I've been sort of trying to follow along with the promo cycle and the lead up to you announcing this record, and then some of the aftermath posts with the video and the artwork and stuff. And it does feel like there's a sense of humor in how you're doing it.
Mhm.
I mean, I didn't know about the record when you started posting like the play and the actor and the director. I was like, what is going on? But like that's at least you're like trying to do something with it that doesn't feel like banging your head against the wall.
Yeah, that's what I was like, I just want to do something that's like kind of fun for me. You know, it's something that I'll like laugh about alone at home and then put on the internet and be like, what am I doing? I don't know. But I think there's something fun in like trying to confuse people, I guess. And
Sure.
even though like I feel like it was pretty obvious that it was like an album launch, but I have like pretty close friends who are messaging me being like, when does your play come out? And I'm like, there isn't really a play. I mean, maybe there should be, but
I don't know. I mean, it felt plausible to me that there would that there would maybe
yeah,
be an Austra production on stage
I mean,
somewhere.
I wish that would be amazing. Yeah.
So I mean, you were having sort of like a bit of cheeky fun, I think, with the promo cycle around announcing this record.
Mhm.
And it is aesthetically, it is a pretty fun record. I mean, we'll get into the musicality of it in a little bit, but it is very groovy. It has a lot of beats. I know you took a lot of inspiration from certain echelons of dance music,
Mhm.
but lyrically speaking, it does feel like it is extremely personal.
Mhm.
Um, you're you're chuckling because I feel like that's an understatement.
Yeah.
Um, before we even get into all that, I mean, it feels like it must be incorrect to say that Austra's never been personal.
Mhm.
Right. Like I feel like you have probably written about yourself to a degree.
Mhm.
Right. Is that right?
I mean, that's true, but definitely, it's I just feel like my whole approach to music making or like putting out records was just backwards. Like I feel like there's so many artists who start making music and their inspiration and aspiration are like other bands that they think are cool.
Hmm.
Whereas like I never liked bands or like listened to bands. And like when I was making music, when I first started, lyrics were like completely irrelevant to me.
Hmm.
Like I just couldn't care less. And like the my very earliest recordings were literally just scratch vocals that like made absolutely no sense. And and there's something, not to say that makes like bad music or something, but it was just like a really different approach.
Hmm.
And this record is the first time that I actually started with lyrics over
Okay.
music. And yeah, like it was kind of like a very specific component of how I made this record, which I'm sure we'll get into, but a lot of the lyrics on this record actually started as essentially journal entries that
Hmm.
I turned into songs, which is why it does feel like extremely personal.
Yeah, and I mean the press notes don't waste any time getting to it, and I think you've been pretty public about sort of the general gist of what fueled this record. But if you could, I mean, in as much detail as you'd like, could you kind of share what the story behind this record is?
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting because this record comes out essentially 6 years after I experienced a pretty traumatic breakup.
Hmm.
Um, and some of the songs on this record were written like within 2 weeks of that breakup happening. Um, and most of them were, I'd say, like at least the lyrics were written probably within 2 years. So we're talking like 2020, 21, a little bit of 2022. And, we're now, when by the time this record comes out, it's almost 2026. So it's
Hmm.
been a while. Um, but so that was I think that this breakup lyrically has really come to sort of define this record. But because there's so much time has passed, I was really able to kind of take those sort of like thoughts and feelings and everything I had experienced, put it to music, and then eventually create this like new sort of beast in a way, which is Chin Up Buttercup, which has actually become something that's like I'm having fun with and kind of like laughing about. But definitely the source material came from what was a pretty dark time for me.
Mm.
And it's just been on this sort of journey, I suppose.
So, like the time away from the event itself, did that lead to making it easier for you to then finish the record, or a certain objectivity to that event for this record?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the time away, um, I don't think this campaign would look the same if I had put out the record in 2022 or
Right.
2023 or something like that. I think it would have been a lot more depressing. But, because, and it wasn't even necessarily a choice. Like I was making music, I was making these songs. And then I actually was interrupted because I got asked to do a score for a TV show and a film, and
Mm.
ended up getting like a few other scores out of that. So I spent about a year and a half completely working on something else completely different. And then when I came back to this record with fresh eyes and fresh ears and was sort of going through everything that I had written and choosing what I was going to put on the record, I think I was sort of able to hear it with like a different newfound perspective. And that was when I was able to kind of finish it and decide what I wanted to do with the songs and how I wanted to present them and release them.
Yeah. And I mean, most of them are quite sort of big and sort of groove centered or synth centered, like I mentioned. But did they start as just piano?
Most of them, no, I would say. I think there's like maybe one or two that started on the keyboard. And if you're familiar with the record, it'll be pretty obvious which ones those ones are because they're the ones that don't have beats.
Right, right.
Um, but I think what another thing that's significant about this record is that, I wrote the lyrics first, but I actually wrote a lot of the music separately from that. So, like Math Equation started as an instrumental track. Fallen Cloud started as an instrumental track. Amnesia started as an instrumental track. So like a lot of these tracks, they sort of started on as instrumentals. And when I decided I wanted to add vocals, that's when I like went back into my writing from early in
Okay.
the breakup and like chose these little segments and like edited them a bit and then just kind of sort of freestyled them on top of the instrumental recordings. And then that pretty much became the songs. Like there wasn't a lot of editing. Like I would say Math Equation, Fallen Cloud, these are like first takes. like I re-recorded them and everything, but in terms of writing, it was like I performed it and that was the song.
Yeah,
So that was a really different approach for me.
right. And so because this was sort of, I mean, not fully uncharted territory, but because you were writing so closely to your lived experience, I mean, I guess I'm curious what the process was in the end, or what the process was in the end for like how far into this to go or how far into these feelings to go. Like, were there boundaries you set up for yourself? Were there lines that you had? Like, were there limits to basically what you were sharing, or were you kind of like letting it all out?
Well, I think that I I essentially created this character Buttercup so that I could just like eliminate all the boundaries.
Okay.
Because I think that like sort of being able to like speak about the author of this record as a third party person that isn't actually me makes it way easier to talk about everything. And it makes it way easier to kind of lean into these sort of like emotions and dark thoughts and all of this stuff, because I don't know, like part of what I found interesting in my like healing process of healing from the breakup was, when you get into these sort of really, really negative mindsets where like everything just seems like so terrible and it just seems like nothing will ever be good again in your life. And then like maybe even a week later, you look back on that day and you're like, whoa, like what was going on there? And
Yeah.
you see it from this outside perspective and you can almost laugh because of like how extreme your thoughts and feelings were, even though in the moment it feels so real. when you're outside of it and looking back on it, like I kind of enjoyed that experience of being able to almost make fun of myself, being
Mm,
like, wow, that's I'm like, I think it's somewhat comical that my brain was able to convince me of these truths so thoroughly. And that was sort of my approach with this record. I'm like, okay, when I wrote a lot of these songs, when I wrote a lot of these lyrics, I was in this mindset. It was extremely real to me. But hearing it later and being able to recognize kind of how overly dramatic I was being, then I was able to be like, okay, well, let's lean into this. And, as someone who comes from an opera background, like in high school, my favorite music was Puccini opera. So this is like very familiar territory for me. I
right.
was like, okay, well, let's just like think about this and think about how this could be like a Puccini opera, even though obviously sonically it's not too similar to that.
No, but sort of that like that heightened tragic kind of art form.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And yeah, but also what's interesting is I feel like historically my music has sort of always leaned into this drama, and that like melodramatic singing style has been a big part of what I do. But when I think about my past records, I wasn't actually singing about like any devastate. Like I wasn't actually experiencing any sort of devastation or
Right.
heartbreak. I was just kind of like acting that, like pretending I was in a
Yeah.
way. And this is the first record where I actually did experience that devastation. And I actually found that it didn't always translate into these like big arias. It actually often translated into sort of this more like, I don't know, like lo-fi nonchalant way of singing, or almost this like I don't care about anything way of singing, which I was really surprised about. That it was sort of like what I tended towards naturally instead of what has historically been like my thing.
Yeah, and I mean it's funny you phrase it that way because that was something I picked up on, especially on songs like Think Twice, which are a lot peppier than what we might expect from an Austra song. Even those spoken asides in that song, there's such a comedy to it. Like there is sort of a comedic element to it to a track like that, even though it's talking about something quite serious.
Mhm.
But it does sound like sort of locating that objectivity probably helped lead you down that avenue.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
actually it's funny that you bring up that song because Think Twice was probably the last song I wrote for the record. And that was the one where I had like fully established and embraced this sort of like comedic angle. So that was like going full on into that. Like
Mm.
to me that the sort of like comedy aspect of it, I would say kind of started with the song Fallen Cloud, which to me is like when you talk about, the five stages of grief, it's like the what's it called? The negotiation? No, it's
Bargaining.
yeah, it's the bargaining phase of grief. And there's just something kind of like cheeky about those lyrics, like
Mm.
I just want to change you just a little bit. And that was like a particular approach that, again, when I wrote it, I wasn't trying to write lyrics. I was just like writing in my journal. And then I went back to it and was like, oh, this is like an interesting kind of approach. And like I actually really like this way of speaking to an ex or trying to like win back an ex, because it's kind of like, I don't know, it's a way of singing about heartbreak that I hadn't really heard too much before. Like at the specific bargaining phase, I think can be like sort of silly. And I like the idea of leaning into that.
Yeah. One other thing that struck me when I was reading through sort of the bio of this record, is that there's a Louise Eldridge quote in there,
Hmm.
um, which I will read since not everyone obviously will see the press notes, but it just says, "Life will break you. Nobody can protect you from that, and living alone won't either. For solitude will also break you with its yearning. You have to love. You have to feel. It is the reason you are here on earth. You are here to risk your heart. You are here to be swallowed up."
Hmm.
So it does feel to me like that quote does align pretty well because it's such an open-hearted
Mhm.
concept. And I do feel like this record is pretty open-hearted. It's like open, I was about to say it's like an open wound, but I don't necessarily mean that in like a depressing or oppressive way. It's just that it's kind of all out on the table.
Mhm.
I mean, do you feel like the sentiment behind that Eldritch quote kind of resonates with this record, or just with you and how you kind of came out of this experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think before this experience, like I'm throwing out all these kind of like typical therapy words. I've obviously done like a lot of therapy during this time, but like I I sort of established that my like previous self before 2020, I really sort of divide like the before and after 2020 for me. You know, I was like the person before the breakup and the person after, and there's like two distinct people here. Um, the before person was very much an avoidant. You know, like I really, really struggled to connect with people in a way that was vulnerable and emotional. You know, I've had like ex-girlfriends, they nicknamed me, I remember my first one nicknamed me Corpsey.
Oh,
Like,
geez.
I know, which was, you know, I was like, oh, okay. But at the time, I like didn't understand it. I was like, why? Like, how am I different than anybody else? But I think like after I experienced this, and there was like one incident that happened within the first couple of weeks of the breakup that I think has kind of like defined the way I moved through this experience. Like I was texting one of my really close friends about getting dumped, and she was like, I want to call you and talk about this. And I was like, absolutely not. I don't want to talk on the phone because I was just going to be crying and I was too embarrassed.
Hmm.
She like insisted. She was like, no, I'm calling you. And she called me and she forced me to talk to her. And I was just like bawling on the phone. And I realized that that was actually the first time that I had like cried like that in front of anyone ever.
Mm.
And it felt so good. Like it felt so freeing. And it also kind of like created this unbreakable bond between us where I'm like, from that one experience, I'm like, you're like my best friend for life. Like, you know, whatever, best friend. I have lots of best friends, but like, I just feel this like really strong connection with this person who was able to show up for me in this moment of like complete despair and not be afraid of that despair
Right.
or like grossed out by it or something. And I think that like learning to sort of reveal those like vulnerable parts of myself allowed me to create lots of connections like that in the years following. And I think also led me to decide that I wanted to put out this record with these lyrics because I was like, okay. And even now, like when I think about that, when I think about like crying in front of somebody, there's something I perceive as like kind of gross and shameful about that. Like it's not something I'm thrilled about. And like even the whole process of putting out this record so far, I'm like embarrassed every day. Like every time I post something on the internet, I'm like immediately humiliated. But but I know that like there's something on the other side. And like there's something to this. Like there's a reason why we reveal these parts of ourselves, and I have had the experience of reaping the benefit of that. And you know, I'm just hoping that I don't regret it in a
Well,
few months.
yeah. I mean, when you write something this personal and you release it, and everyone knows kind of the general story about why it's so personal. I mean, I would think that for many people, there would have to be a piece of you that at some point goes, you know what? Never mind. I'm not gonna put this one out.
Yeah.
I mean, did you ever battle with that?
There are songs that I decided not to put out. There
Okay.
was
Okay.
some that like crossed the line. That I was
Okay.
like, this is a bit too much.
Right, right.
But even still, I like look. I listen to them sometimes, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, there's still something here.
Yeah.
I'm
May-
kind of interested in. So
maybe they're live favorites.
yeah, something like that. Maybe next year. We'll see how it all goes. If it goes well, I'll be like, all right, you want more trauma? Here
Yeah.
you go. If not,
Um, yeah, because it's like you say, it's like being that vulnerable, whether you're bawling your eyes out to a friend or, sharing with whoever may listen, these super, super personal songs, it's a scary thing. And it's
Mhm.
like, it does feel like this weird, we're in this weird era now. We have been for a few years, but we're in this weird era now where we're like closer and farther than ever. And
Mhm.
so, like, it's so easy to quickly be super vulnerable online,
Mhm.
but like, it's so hard to still be vulnerable. It's like even harder to be vulnerable in real life. I don't know. So I just feel like if I were in a position like yours, it would definitely like give me some trepidation of like how open am I going to be here? So I mean, I do think it takes a certain amount of, I don't know, boldness to sort of be like, no, fuck it. I'm gonna put these out. Like this is what happened.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, it's interesting that you say that as well because I do feel like social media has a tendency to kind of like obviously water things down.
Yeah.
And, you know, like people can be super vulnerable on social media, but you're just seeing it as like, oh, this is like brand vulnerable social media.
Right.
You know, it's not like, I don't know, it's hard to like actually create something meaningful.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I guess that's why so far, you know, my approach hasn't been to sort of pair the release of all this music with like some heartfelt statement about it. I'm like, okay, you can listen to it and you can get that, but what I'm going to
Yeah.
say about it is going to be like completely different.
Yeah. And I mean, for what it's worth, I mean, a song like Math Equation, which is the first one out, it's it's pretty blunt.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not much that needs to be said about it.
It's pretty blunt.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
so okay, so speaking of the music side of things, like we've said, it is a more upbeat record or more dancey record than maybe people are used to. Although not that you've ever been like afraid of, synths and beats and stuff, but there is a certain pop quality to this record, and specifically dance music as a genre.
Hmm.
I read that you were particularly inspired by Madonna's Ray of Light and like the sort of like Eurodance strains of dance music.
Hmm.
How did you land on this genre as the vehicle for these songs?
I mean, it's interesting because I feel like that we're in such a zeitgeist where there's so many artists right now who were specifically influenced by Eurodance. And I personally think a big part of that was the pandemic. Um,
Hmm.
like I think that naturally the like euphoria of Eurodance was something that a lot of people became drawn to during that period. And you know, in my case specifically, in the early days of the pandemic, or even in like the winters prior, like I live in Toronto, and I remember reading somewhere that I think in Toronto we had like the most lockdowns of any other city, like for
Mm,
some reason, like just like yeah, I don't know why that was the case. And the thing about the Toronto lockdown is that when it's the winter, nobody's meeting up outside. So we had some long, dark winters where, you know, I didn't see some of my closest friends for like 6 months. You know, we
right.
were really, really isolated. And that happened like the winter 20 to 2021, and then also 21 to 22 for some reason. I remember it was
Mm,
like a string of like really dark winters. Um, and we all kind of like we developed what we called these bubbles. I guess that's like a common COVID term or whatever. But for me, it's particularly significant because, like, in the early days of the pandemic, me and a bunch of friends, we started a weekly party called Bubble Babes in the park. This was in the summer. So it was like every Friday, it was like a queer party. And like 150 people would show up to this park, and we just like set up some speakers in the field, and we'd have Bubble Babes every single Friday
mm,
until the winter, and we couldn't anymore. And then in the winter, for me, like I was dating somebody new who I'm still dating now, and they were from France, and so they had all of this like they grew up with this stuff, like all this Eurodance stuff. Like we didn't so
right.
much in Canada, but they did, and we were a bubble, like me and my partner, my new partner, and we spent all of these dark days of the pandemic just like blasting Eurodance, like blasting like I'm blue and like whatever, you know, um, what's it called? Yeah, better off alone.
Oh yeah.
these kind of things. And so that was like it just became like ingrained in my brain, and it was like such a part of that experience. Like I just remember like darkness, dead of winter, no socializing, we're blasting Better Off Alone. And
Sounds
that
fun.
like yeah, it was fun. And so that's like I was like when I was like making this record, I was like, okay, I have all this like pretty depressing material, but like I want to make it more fun and more euphoric. And so
Right.
that's kind of the goal.
I mean, is there any subtext to the fact that it's lyrically about your ex and musically more setting oriented to your current partner?
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's
Okay.
like I mean, it's funny. I don't know, like my partner and I really have a lot of feelings about breakups and the particular grief people experience when they experience a breakup, because I feel like so much of it is like if you read online, they're like it takes usually 3 months to get over a breakup, and then it's fine, and then you meet somebody else, and then it's like old news. But like it's just so much more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And for me in this case, I don't think that it really hit until almost a year after. And I was with a new partner at the time. And
Hmm.
so I was navigating a lot of feelings I had about my previous partner and that breakup with my new partner.
Hmm.
I think like most relationships probably wouldn't be able to withstand something like that, but I think there's something to be said about like two lesbians who go to therapy and like what we're capable of. So I think we managed to make it work.
And so why or how did like Ray of Light become this touchstone or the work of Orbital?
So that was like kind of near the end. And again, it was my new partner who, in the final stages of album making, like I remember, like came up to me one day in the studio and was like, "Hey, you should make your record sound like this." And like we listened to Ray of Light, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this is perfect." And it was more so we used it as like a North Star for like the final, like last 10% of the record. So, when you're like finishing a track and you've got all these like creative decisions to make that will kind of like define the aesthetic of the track,
Mm,
we were like very inspired by that album and like as a whole, just like how all the songs kind of fit together and the transitions between them. And so in terms of like creating some sort of cohesiveness, like when we were like like what kind of snare sound should this be, we were like, okay, what happened on Ray of Light, and like what would happen here, and just that would help us kind of like stay focused and
yeah.
stay with it.
I mean, it is, if you're gonna have a touchstone, I mean, that's a pretty good one.
Mm.
Ray of Light is sort of timeless, so that works in your favor. And it is also like weirdly this great example of the exact kind of strain of dance pop music that you're describing here.
Hmm.
I mean, I definitely hear it on the opening track, those sort of looping background vocals feel very Eurodance. I am especially drawn to the penultimate song, The Hopefulness of Dawn,
Hmm.
which is also the longest song on the record, but it has these sort of big crescendos that feel like so of that era and so of that sound.
Hmm.
Um, I'm curious what the journey was of a song like that, especially in terms of getting it to where it got to. I mean, was it always that big or did it sort of just grow and grow?
That's so we're talking about The Hopefulness of Dawn, which is actually my favorite song on the record. I think because it's so accurately it's euphoric, like
Mm,
the moment of euphoria.
it's a release.
Yeah, it's a release. And that song, so it started as just the synth buildup. Like I think I had this synth riff that's like sort of this like classic trance, like euphoric synth line, and that's what the song was for like over a year. And my co-producer and I, Kieran, were really struggling to make a song out of it. I was like, I know that I love this riff and I want to do something with it, but I don't know what yet. And the sort of moment that happens before that kind of came later. Like
Mm,
essentially what I did is that euphoric moment starts in like a particular key, and I knew that the moment before it needed to start in like a complementary, or needed to end in a complementary key in order to get like the impact of
Mm-hmm.
this like euphoria. So I was like, okay, I need to write something that ends specifically in this key on this note, and that was like the only guideline that I had. And I had like a lot of different songs that, like a lot of different versions that were the song before that euphoria moment, but none of them were really just quite sticking. Um, and then, yeah, I had sort of like another automatic writing day, which is a lot of the lyrics on the track on this record were. And I just like sat down and sort of wrote those lyrics in like one sitting. And we're like, okay, I like these lyrics. I'm gonna sing them just on like a, I think it's like D major or something like that. I'm just gonna sing like these lyrics in on just like one note. And that was what I did. And it worked. It got us into that like euphoria moment with like the
Mm-hmm.
exact right like transition. Um and then yeah, there was like, you know, more challenges. We were like, okay, what do we do after the euphoria moment? We have the build up, but then what? And this is where like my co-producer Kieran, I think this is where our collaboration reached like its heights, because we were passing the song back and forth, and I had like come up with this arrangement of like this new intro, and like I'd figured out like where it was going to go sonically, but we didn't have like the production there yet. And then one day he sent me this version with like these insane hi-hats, and I like that, just like it just took it to like the extremes that I couldn't even fathom, like just the highest extremes. And
Yeah.
I listened to it and it was just, I think I like cried. I was just like, this, it just feels like all the work that we've been putting into this record for like years, it suddenly just like clicked. I was like, this is like what our collaboration was meant to do, like this
Yeah.
moment. So, so yeah, I'm glad that you picked that song, because that one is also, to me, it's like the song that like represents the record,
Yeah.
um, to me.
Yeah. And I mean, there is a title track, but it's very short. It's actually kind of like eerie, this
Yeah, it's
title
very.
track. It is a weird one.
Mhm.
Um, what's the deal with the title track? Was it like a later thing? Was it some kind of key to the record? Like, was it just scene setting? Like, what was the deal with this Chin Up Buttercup song?
I think it was kind of scene setting. So I think Chin Up Buttercup, yeah, the song again sort of started again with like the breakdown. There's this like really intense bridge that, you know, I made with Kieran that's just this like really, really heavy kick drum. And then we had this like bridge that was like this super distorted, heavy moment. And then it was like, okay, how do we make this a song? And I think I also had these lyrics, which are the lyrics in that section. Um, I don't remember exactly what they are because I changed them so many times, but it's something like I'm falling out of phase with everybody, everyone around me, or something like that. And it was just, to me, I was trying to like embody this feeling of just feeling so emotionally distressed that it became incredibly challenging to have to sort of function normally, you know, to have like meetings or like have dinner with my parents or like do all of these like
Right.
normal day-to-day things, where I was like trying so hard to act normal, but like actually in my head and in my body and in my heart, I was like extremely dysregulated. And that was sort of like what I was trying to kind of create, like that sort of feeling with that song, and eventually decide that that was what I wanted like the vibe of the record to be. This sort of like just this disconnect, you know, it's like you're just completely at odds with everybody, with the whole world, when you're sort of in that kind of distressed mental state.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean that sort of reminds me of something else that I was reading, basically about this record being sort of about the feeling that the sensation of heartbreak or the feeling of heartbreak is something that we all experience, and yet it is something that like societally is sort of hard to express, or society feels ambivalent to it, or I think I think the word that was used was inconvenienced by it.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, how do you or how did you contend with that sort of feeling really serious, intense feelings, and yet being sort of in a space where culturally or society or socially, people don't necessarily receive that very well.
Well, yeah, I feel like heartbreak is just a very specific and particular type of grief that I think people are, for the most part, ashamed of
Mm,
and humiliated by. And, it's when you're a heartbroken person, it's often because if you were dumped, it's like you were rejected. And so to be wearing this like rejection in such an obvious and
mm,
public way it's embarrassing and it's hard. And there's so much expectation to kind of get over things like that. Like I said, like I spend so much time on the internet, like when does this stop? When do I feel better? And like the original like the consensus of the internet is like 3 months, or like if you
right.
read other things, it's like half the length of the relationship, or like 1 year, or like everybody has these like time frames.
Yeah.
But for me, I like kept passing all these time frames, and I was like, I still don't feel good.
Hmm.
What is wrong with me? Um, and yeah, but I think that what I was feeling is not actually uncommon. I just think that it's something that we really don't talk about. And I think specifically with heartbreak, it's something that although it's like so, it's written about in like millions and millions of poems and movies and books, and it's like it's everywhere. But I think that when we're actually like experiencing it and going through it, it's hard to integrate that as a part of like our adult functioning lives, and not just like I'm a the protagonist in this like fantasy novel or whatever.
Right,
It's hard
right.
to be like, okay, I'm like a functioning adult and I'm also experiencing this major destabilization. And there's just this like big disconnect that I found. And yeah, I find also if you haven't experienced it, you're not going to get it. That's the other thing I learned, is that people who haven't experienced grief from heartbreak, like I've been through lots of breakups, but I had never experienced this level of grief. And if
Hmm.
you haven't experienced that, you won't understand. And so I think that, as well, moving through the world as somebody who is experiencing grief due to a breakup, every time you talk to somebody who hasn't, they're like, they think you're crazy. But
Right.
but when somebody who has, they're like, oh yeah, like I
I
know.
get it.
Hmm.
Yeah, because it does, you're right. It's totally something that even the grief piece from a heartbreak is something that people have been writing about for 1,000 years and singing about for longer, and yet is, yeah, something that no one, we don't want to talk about. We don't want to talk about that. We want other people to talk about it so we have something to watch or listen to or read, but
Hmm.
we don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Which is such an interesting sort of hypocrisy to live in as a culture, but I do feel like that is where we are.
Yeah, it's like a dishonorable grief. It's like when you experience grief as a result of death, it's this like honorable grief where it's like
Hmm.
you honor the person that died forever. Whereas with heartbreak, we're just supposed to forget about it. Like the advice is like forget about it. Like
Yeah,
stop thinking about that person, cut them out of your life, cut ties, move on, everything's great.
yeah,
I'm just like nobody actually forgets about it. Like it's impossible. Like you
right.
can't actually forget about something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think that there's just something about it that isn't quite fully grasped or understood despite the like plethora of literature that exists.
Yeah. Um, do you feel like finishing and releasing this record is sort of like a victory lap sort of moment for you? Like, do you kind of feel like you're firmly now like on the other side of things?
I mean, I don't think so. Like like I don't think I'll ever be fully firmly on the other side of anything. I
Fair
think that
enough.
yeah, I think that this record is just like another step. It's just like another stepping stone in this like very long path that'll probably be on my entire life.
Hmm.
And you know, it would be nice to be able to like package it up in this like nice tidy box and be like, put out the record, I'm done. Goodbye,
Right.
record. It's in the world, everything's gone. But it's like now I just have all this anxiety about put like it's like this new anxiety that I have because it's like now all of these songs and words and everything I was saying and thinking and feeling is going into this world. It's almost like reopened the box and
Mm,
like, in some ways made it worse. But yeah, so I think like the experience of releasing music in general is so weird. It's almost like, you know, when you make any kind of art, I think that so much of yourself goes into it that there's almost never ever going to be the response that you want or need in any capacity. Like no matter how successful it is, like nothing, you'll never receive the exact response and feedback that you want. And so in a sense, putting out this record is for me it's less about like, okay, I'm okay now, but I'm like, I know that this is going to be really hard, but I'm doing it anyways and just
mm,
going with it. Even though,
yeah.
like I said, every time I post on the internet, I'm like so embarrassed. I'm like, I'm just like, walking through the flames and just going with it, even though it's extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, maybe that's just part of the process is like we
Hmm.
were talking about earlier with like being vulnerable with that friend. It's like now you're being vulnerable in a very public way and in a
Hmm.
much more massive scale,
Yeah.
but it's just one of the parts of the process, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Hmm.
Um, are you planning to play this record?
Yeah. I have, I don't know when this comes out, but I do have like tours booked through
Okay.
2026. So US, Canada, Europe, all the places. Um, yeah,
Are
which I'm excited
you,
about.
yeah, are you, I was gonna say, are you looking forward to performing these songs specifically?
You know, I actually really am because I wrote these songs with live performance in mind.
Okay.
Like my last few records, I sort of perceive them as more like introspective records. And this one, honestly, part of the reason why I had live performance in mind is because it was the pandemic and I wasn't working. And I was like, I need to make money. I need to make songs that I can translate to a stage because I need to start playing shows again.
Mm,
So it was almost like a necessity to like make music that specifically would translate live.
yeah.
That was my goal with these songs. And for that reason, I'm actually so excited to play them because I think that they're gonna translate really well live. And yeah, I think it'll be really fun.
Do you have fun sort of like trying to select which older songs to kind of lace in, or is that like a nightmare?
I mean, at this point, I have so many records that
Yeah.
it's like greatest hits. So there's like a lot of songs I've made that I sort of blacked out that I just like will never listen to again and pretend don't exist. But but there's a lot that like I still like. And so now at this point, you know, I'm choosing like one or two songs from like all the old records and
Right.
it's I think most of the records I've made have like one or two songs that have sort of like sustained the test of time. You know, maybe for super fans it's like four or
Yeah.
something like that, but you know, and I think that's like pretty normal.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Um, but yeah, but I do feel like I need to kind of go back and like realign my older stuff so that it fits sonically with
Hmm.
newer stuff because I mean obviously because it's new it feels this way to me, but I feel like the newer stuff sounds the best and I need the rest of it to sound as good.
That's fair enough.
Mhm.
So we should say again the new Austra record, which I think is the fifth Austra
Yeah.
record. Yep. Chin Up Buttercup out November 14th on Domino. Katie, I appreciate your time so much. Thank you for coming and hanging out for a while.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to chat about this, so thank you.